Thank you. So just a quick review. We started talking about the first value, just speaking of the foundational spiritual journey. The fact that we want to do life well, with wisdom, connected to each other and connected to God. And then we talked about being a team player. And we can do this in really intentional, simple ways, like with our eyes, through the ministry of just noticing the needs all around us. And with our ears, by just listening to one another. With our mouths, by speaking words that build up team and bless one another. And with our hands, by just serving. Then we talked about the value of courageous integrity. Reminding ourselves, God did not give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but rather one of courage as He calls us to lead lives of holiness and integrity. And then earlier today, we talked about the value of getting through the Honolulu airport quickly. Actually, that was about excellence in service. We're building an army here in the conference of ATS agents, that is, sold-out followers of Jesus, who, of course, do their jobs, but they do their jobs and then some. And we don't, of course, have to do the extra. We get to serve others with excellence, doing things that ultimately they're going to talk about at our own funerals. And then finally, the value of healthy, successful employees. If you want to just sum it all up, that's a good way to do it. We're just creating sold-out followers of Jesus who are healthy and successful and do their calling well and wisely. And so once again, we consult the teaching of Jesus to give us some perspective on this final value of being called to be a successful, healthy employee. Luke chapter 12, if you have your Bible, we begin in verse 13, and we're just going to sort of walk our way through this conversation that Jesus has. Verse 13, someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now, this is a very common thing in ancient Palestine, where they would bring their financial disputes to a respected rabbi such as Jesus. But Jesus wants nothing to do with this. And so he replies, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." So here is the point that Jesus is making in the parable that he is about to tell. That a successful life, a healthy life, ultimately cannot be measured by the value of one's portfolio or by the number of possessions that you might have. And so then to illustrate this, he gives us the story. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry." This man figures, I just need bigger barns so that I can store more of my crops. The problem is, it's never really enough. He says, at that point, I will be healthy and happy and successful. But of course, it never ends, does it? This insatiable appetite for more. It's like the old joke that you probably remember that asks, so who's happier, the millionaire or the man with 10 kids? And of course the answer is what? The man with 10 kids. Why? He doesn't want any more, right? This man, it's never enough. And so God says to him, "You fool." This very night, Your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? It's very strong language. This is God calling the man in the parable a fool. I remember as a boy one time in anger lashing out at my brother and calling him a fool. As a punishment, my dad sent me to the room and said, "You cannot leave until you find the verse in the Bible that says anybody who calls his brother a fool is in danger of burning in hellfire." I went to my room. An hour later, my dad happened by. "Have you found the verse yet?" I was shocked. I said, "You mean there's actually a verse like that in the Bible?" He said, "Yes, there is, and you're not leaving your room until you find it." And so I started reading in Matthew. I still remember the impact of Matthew chapter 5, verse 22 that says, "But I tell you that anyone who says to his brother, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell." That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? And yet here it is God calling the man a fool. No wonder many commentaries refer to this parable as, quote, "the most startling parable Jesus ever told." The man in the story, he was very wealthy, by external appearances, very successful, and yet he was a fool because he made 3 fatal mistakes. Mistake number 1. He never saw beyond himself. Of all the stories Jesus told, this one by far contains the most personal pronouns. Listen once again for all of the personal pronouns. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods, and I will say to myself, 'You have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry.'" I mean, it's just obnoxious, isn't it? Me, my, myself, I. It's a foolish way to live. And so Jesus says, think beyond just yourself, but look to serve the people around you. A while back, I was traveling, and one of my favorite apps is an app that was developed and is owned by a former Walla Walla College student who was there back when I used to pastor on that campus. It's called the Do Good app. And just every day, it gives you a suggestion on one good thing that you can do for that day outside of yourself. And it's a wonderful story behind the development of the app that he told me that he was really struggling with depression. And that this was the best way he discovered to get out of that dark cloud around him, to look to do something for others every day. And just simple suggestions. So a while back I was traveling and I looked at my Do Good app, which suggested today, do something kind for a child. Well, as it happened, I was at the airport getting ready to board when they announced there has been a maintenance delay. It should only take about 5 minutes. Don't leave the boarding area. 2 hours later, we finally got to board. By that point, I was fuming. Now, I settled a little bit when I gave them my ticket to board and the machine beeped, alarming them that they had given me an upgrade. So that was nice. As I got onto the plane, I was starting to get settled into my comfortable seat when I overheard the captain say to the co-captain, "Oh, no, that's something different. We're going to have to get everybody off the plane again." Now, not very many people had boarded, so they didn't go over the loudspeaker system. Instead, the captain just came back and he announced to the few of us on the plane, "Look, really sorry, but this is another maintenance issue. We're going to have to ask you to deplane. But not to worry," he assured us, "this should only take about 5 minutes. So I started pulling my stuff back together, and just then a girl from the back of the plane comes racing up the aisle. She throws herself into the seat directly in front of me. And then she shouts back to her grandma, who is slowly shuffling down the aisle toward a wheelchair waiting for her on the jet bridge. She said, "Grandma, look at me. I'm flying Beanbag Airlines. This is so comfortable. Come cuddle with me in the chair, Grandma. There's plenty of room for both of us." And as Grandma got closer, she scolded her and said, Gwendolyn, get out of that chair. That's reserved only for really rich people." And little Gwendolyn said, "Well, then someday I'm going to be a really rich person because I want to sit in that chair." We got off the plane. Sure enough, the 5 minutes stretched into 15, 20, an hour. 2 hours, which I think that was my fault. Because God knew that it would take about that long to get through my thick skull a reminder of a perfect opportunity that I had to do my one good thing for the day, to do something kind for a child. And so I went up and arranged for a new seating assignment, and I couldn't wait as I sat in my new seat in coach section with a great view through the mesh curtain to my old seat. Then I knew what was about to happen. As the flight attendant walked all the way to the back of the plane and informed little Gwendolyn that she had a new seating assignment. And as soon as this dawned on Gwendolyn, she jumped up and shouted so everybody in the airplane could hear her, "I'm going to first class." And then she comes running down the aisle, high-fiving every passenger on the plane, like a basketball player running through the tunnel of teammates, high-fiving everybody before the game. And she runs into this, throws herself into that seat. And then I watched the entire flight. I'm telling you, the flight attendant that day got a serious cardiovascular workout because little Gwendolyn understood the value of unlimited Coca-Cola. She worked that attendant nonstop. When we landed, I wanted to just wait there as Gwendolyn called up her mother, gave me an opportunity to practice my primary spiritual gift, which is eavesdropping. And I listened to little Gwendolyn tell her mom, "You're never going to believe where I am. No, I'm not still stuck at the airport. I'm in first class. That's right, Mom. You heard me right. I'm in first class. Did you know you can drink all the Coca-Cola you want? And you have your own private little bathroom up here. I've met so many friends. They're all bajillionaires up here, but I took pictures, selfies with most of them, so I'll show you. I sat next to Mr. Jim, who didn't want his hot chocolate chip cookie, and so he gave his cookie to me. Oh, Grandma? No, Grandma had to sit back there with all the poor people. Now, I'll tell you, I've traveled a lot in my life. But if you ask me about my favorite flight of all time, I'll tell you about the day that the flight was delayed for 4 hours, but I got an upgrade from first class to coach. If you want to live in the reality of the kingdom of God, live beyond yourself. Take every opportunity you can to get an upgrade from first class to coach. Second fatal mistake of the fool. He never saw beyond his stuff. He schemes, I'm going to build bigger barns. so that I can store more crops and I can just get richer and richer. And that greed never ends. It's never satiated, is it? And he can't see beyond his stuff. I love the story that John Ortberg writes about this. Maybe you've heard him talk about his yai couch. Have you heard him tell this story? It is old, tattered, brown, ugly couch that brought so much joy to their family. So when their kids were quite small, they had this beat-up old couch, and every time Pastor Ortberg would come home from the office, the kids would be waiting in anticipation on that sofa. And Daddy would walk over and he'd pick up each child one by one and throw them as high as he could in the air, and they'd land in this couch and they'd laugh and giggle and have such a good time. Well, finally the day came when they wanted to upgrade their sofa. And so they went to the furniture store and they asked the salesperson about a really nice mauve sofa in the store. Actually, he says, it was the color of Pepto-Bismol, but at that price, back in the day, you called it a mauve sofa. And when the salesman heard that they had 3 young children, he discouraged them from buying the mauve sofa. He said, maybe you want to look at the sofas the color of dirt. And John and Nancy found this to be very offensive. And they said to the guy, we know how to control our kids. They're well behaved. We will take the mauve sofa, thank you very much. Then he writes, anybody want to guess what the number 1 rule about the mauve sofa was? Don't sit on the mauve sofa. Don't play around the mauve sofa. Don't touch the mauve sofa. Don't breathe on the mauve sofa. Don't look at the mauve sofa. Don't think about the mauve sofa. Upon every other piece of furniture in the house thou mayest freely sit, but upon this sofa, this mauve sofa, thou shalt not sit. For on the day thou shalt sit thereupon, ye will surely die. And then came the day of the great fall. And there appeared on the mauve sofa a stain, a red stain, a red jelly stain. And my wife assembled our 3 children in front of the jelly-stained mauve sofa and said, children, take a good look at that. Laura was 4, Mallory was 2, and Johnny 6 months. Children, that is a stain. That is a red stain. That is a red jelly stain. And the man at the sofa store says it is not coming out. Not ever. Not for all eternity. Do you know how long eternity is, children? Eternity is how long you are going to sit there until one of you tells me, who put the red jelly stain on my mauve sofa? And they just sat there terrified. Nobody was going to say a word because they knew what was about to happen. Then he reflects, that was a long time ago. Both the yai couch and the mauve sofa have been gone for a long time, and it's kind of a funny thing. All of my good memories are about the yai couch. To this day, I can close my eyes and I can remember coming in the door from work, throwing those little bodies on that couch, watching them bounce up and down, hearing those giggles that came right down from their bellies on the yai couch. My only memory of the mauve sofa is when I ate a jelly donut on it. And left a secret stain. Because I wasn't telling anybody about it, man. And then this weird thing. You get a mauve sofa, and then all of a sudden, all the rest of the furniture in that room that used to look okay, looks kind of shabby. And then you have to swap all that out and upgrade it to keep up with the mauve sofa. And then you never actually use the room because now it's too nice. Strange thing. We call them our possessions. I think we do that because they end up possessing us. It's so true, isn't it? And I say it is so true because we are moving into a home half the size of the home we have lived in for the past 12 years, and over I keep asking myself, how did we get all of this stuff? Live beyond your stuff. Third fatal mistake, he never saw beyond this world. Why did God call the man a fool? He explains, because this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get all this stuff that you've collected? He failed to see beyond this world. It's like the conversation of the old man with a kid still in high school. And the old man asked him, what are you going to do this summer? Well, I hope to get a job. Mowing lawns or something. Oh, and then what? Well, then I'll go back to school. And then what? Well, eventually I'll graduate from college. And then what? Well, then I'll get a job and I'll make a lot of money. And then what? I'll get married and I'll have children. And then what? I'll retire. And then what? I will die. And then what? Don't be the fool that fails to think beyond this world. Now, I got a picture of this some years ago about just how fickle and fleeting are the things of this world that we put so much value upon. Fame and stuff and money. And Solomon was right when he said it's straw, it's cotton candy, it's meaningless. It's so shallow and fake and fickle. Happened to be in Southern California, endless docket of meetings, so I decided to go over and catch a taping of the old Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Remember him? And after the program, as we were being escorted down the hallway, there were several pages there who were trying to recruit more people for a studio audience to tape another show called Later. Well, I didn't have anything else to do that was really important, and so I decided to go into the next studio audience and see what that show was about. I had never heard of the show before. It was a talk show similar to the Tonight Show. The guest that night, we were told, was going to be the #1 female rap artist in the world. I'd never heard of her before. And so we waited. And they explained, she's on her way, she'll be here shortly, but she's caught in LA traffic. And so we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And finally, a lot of the people just started to bail. And so a desperate MC jumped up on the stage and said, "Oh, nobody leave, we really need you here. She'll be here soon. But look, for now, we need to practice for when she makes her grand entrance. So what I need for this exercise, I need a volunteer." And so in that moment I did, as I always do in situations like that. I looked down and I started praying, "God, please do not let them choose me." And as usually happens, the next thing I hear, "How about you, sir, in the green Sterling Savings Bank t-shirt?" And I'm praying, looking at the Sterling Savings. Oh, no. And I said, "No." And then, of course, he asks the whole audience, "How many of you want this man to come up here?" Which is a way about, "How many of you don't want to come?" And they're all, yeah. And so they drag me up on the stage. And he said, "Okay, what's your name?" "Karl Haffner." "Okay, great. And where are you from?" I said, "Well, Walla Walla, Washington." And everybody in the studio busted up laughing. And he said, no, really, where are you from?" I said, "Walla Walla." "That's a real place?" "That's a real place." "Oh, this is going to be so good. Okay, what do you do?" Well, I'm a pastor. Oh, really? Everybody laughs, And I say, yeah, oh, good. Okay, what denomination? Well, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. He says, oh, I love Joseph Smith. I just went with it because at this point, I was not about to give him a Bible study. And so he said, okay, this is going to be perfect. All you need to do is go backstage, and when I introduce you, you just walk out, okay? All right, so I go backstage, and then the lights all come down. And the band cranks up, and they start playing this number, and then the voiceover. And now, you're not going to believe the guest we have for this special show. That's right, we have your favorite pastor from Walla Walla, Walla Walla, Walla Walla, Washington. It's Karl Haffner. And the applause lights start blinking, and I walk out on stage. The band is blasting, and everybody's going crazy. They are on their feet screaming and yelling and throwing money. The story kind of grows in my own mind. But I'm telling you, you would have thought the president had canceled all taxes. They were going nuts. They loved me. And then as soon as these blinking applause lights went out, boom, it was silent. And I'm standing on the stage as if suddenly I was naked. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought you loved me. I felt very exposed. And it struck me in that moment, that's about right, isn't it? The applause of others, so fickle. It's so fleeting. And yet, how often do we chase after these superficial things, the straw that the world deems to be so important? Stuff, fame, the approval of others, lots of likes on social media. It's cotton candy, friends. Don't just live for this world. That was one of the fatal mistakes of the fool. This very night, your life could be demanded from you. And then what? One final story. A gentleman called me and introduced himself, said, I got your name and number from a friend of a friend. He told me that you might be willing to do my wife's funeral. She just passed away, and I don't know any priests or rabbis or pastors, and so I was hoping maybe you could do it. And I said, I'd be honored to do that. Not to worry, he assured me, you will be compensated handsomely. Well, I didn't think much about the comment until we arranged a time for me to come visit him in his home. I turned onto this long, tree-lined, paved driveway. And when I saw his mansion, I gasped audibly. I was met at the door by the butler, instructed to wait in the foyer of this home. In his lobby, he had a huge waterfall with very mature trees. This is in the lobby of his house. It was unbelievable. And eventually, I got escorted into a living room, and I met this gentleman. We sat down. He said, I really appreciate you doing this. And not to worry, you will be compensated handsomely. I explained, well, I actually work for my denomination and they pay me, and so I never charge any honorariums or expect payment for officiating at funerals. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, okay, then I won't pay you. Which was okay. Except to this day, I really wish I would have at least just asked, what do you mean by compensated handsomely? To this day, I am so curious. I wish I knew, but I never will. So I pulled out my yellow legal pad and said, so tell me about your wife. He said, well, she loved to shop. So I wrote that down. Well, what else? Long silence. Tell me more about your wife. Well, it wasn't like it was a trick question. Finally, he said, well, she really loved shopping. So I underscored it and I said, okay, I understand. And then he snapped, oh, you don't understand. Come, follow me. And so he got up and he escorted me down this long marbled hallway. We stood outside of a closed door where he whispered reverently, this was her blouse room. We walked into this huge room that had all of these circular hangers like you see at Nordstrom, each one stuffed with blouses. Most of them, I noted, still had the price tag dangling from the sleeves. Then we went to the next closed door down the hallway. This was her shoe room. We walked in, looked like a huge library. All of these shelves and all of these boxes of shoes neatly stacked and categorized. We went to the next closed door down the hallway. This was her fur coat room. And he told me before we entered, there's over $1 million of fur coats in this room. And so it went. Well, at the service, he asked me if I would give time for people to share anecdotes and memories of his wife. And so we came to that part of the service, and I opened up the floor and said, there weren't very many people there, but I said, does anybody have a story or a memory that they'd like to share of Sister So-and-so here? And nobody said anything. Now I'm starting to sweat because it's getting awkward. I said, is there anybody who has any memory at all of this one? Just please, somebody, say something. I didn't quite go there, but I was really close. So just somebody say something. Break the silence. Finally, a man in the back of the small chapel raised his hand. He said, I know the salespeople at Nordstrom are really going to miss her. And I said, thank you for that beautiful testimony. At last we can get out of here and go eat potato salad, which we did. I still remember after all these years driving home from that funeral home and just feeling this profound cloud of sadness sort of envelop me. Not that there's anything wrong with buying clothes or nice clothes or living in a beautiful home. But do you suppose maybe if she bought one more blouse, then she would have been happy? When you sum up a person's life, and the whole legacy is she loved to shop, it just makes you feel sad, doesn't it? Profoundly sad, because it's so small. God calls all of us, in the Potomac Conference here, every one of us, to lead lives of impact and purpose and meaning. And so he invites us to live the values of his kingdom. to live beyond our stuff, to live beyond ourselves, to live beyond this world, to really make a difference by living out the values of his kingdom. So my prayer is that God would bless each one of you richly and give you healthy and make you healthy, successful, sold out disciples of Jesus. Thank you, everybody. What a blessing it has been here to be here.